The AMD Radeon RX 7800 XT GPU is the baby brother to the recently reviewed RX 7900 GRE card. The card slots in just under the 7900 GRE and across the board includes slightly weaker specs. But that doesn't mean the card is weak by any means. It is another great 1440p card that you can consider when shopping around for components, especially in 2024. The specific model in this review is the Gigabyte Radeon RX 7800 XT Gaming OC model. This card includes an overclocked boost clock out of the box of 2565 MHz compared to the reference card of 2430 MHz. The game clock speed is also overclocked to 2254 MHz compared to the reference card of 2124 MHz. It comes with 3840 stream processors, 16GB of GDDR6 RAM, a 256-bit memory bus, and the memory clock speed of 19.5 gigabits per second out of the box. On paper, this Gigabyte AMD RX 7800 XT Gaming OC is stiff competition for 1440p GPUs, especially with the help of AMD FSR. You should be able to push out 1440p 60fps games at times and even 4K ones when you tweak the settings here and there. Similar to Gigabyte's other gaming OC GPUs, this model features an all-black design with a triple fan layout. It includes three 90mm fans with alternate spinning to produce the wind force cooling system. The card also comes with Gigabyte's large copper plate design, and the screen cooling pulls heat from across the card and sends it out the back end. The card itself is quite a chunky piece of hardware. It comes in at 302mm long by 130mm wide and is 56mm thick. You'll need a 700W power supply to power this GPU and all of its tech. When it comes to the ports, it includes two HDMI 2.1 ports alongside two DisplayPort 2.1 ports. This port spec can support up to 4K at 480Hz or 16K at 60Hz with HDR. Setting the card up is pretty simple. There's no motherboard mount on this unit, so it just gets plugged into your motherboard and screwed into the case. It uses two 8-pin PCIe cables and is quite easy to get going. The card itself is a Gigabyte Gaming OC card. This lineup has looked pretty much the same for a while now, and this model doesn't change anything. Gigabyte has even stuck to the single RGB light logo situated on the side of the card. I am a fan of the lineup and the clean design fits into most PCs. I do think the screen cooling hole is a bit smaller than it should be, but we'll test it out when it comes to the thermals. When it comes to the performance of the Gigabyte AMD RX 7800 XT Gaming OC, I ran a few benchmarks on the card across 1440p titles. You can see that most 1440p games held up quite well. Sure, some dropped performance when I enabled ray tracing, but you can always counter this with a few FSR settings here and there. Thermals were also quite good. After 30 minutes of testing, I measured only 58 degrees Celsius on the GPU with a hotspot heat of 80 degrees Celsius when using the OC BIOS setting on the card. When enabling the silent BIOS, these temperatures did slightly increase. I measured 67 degrees Celsius on the GPU and 90 degrees Celsius on the hotspot. I usually tell people not to use the silent BIOS on GPUs nowadays because these cards are usually quite quiet. However, this Gigabyte card is actually the opposite. The card's acoustic levels were some of the highest I've measured on an AMD GPU in a while now. I measured 42 decibels when using the OC BIOS and 36 decibels when using the silent BIOS. These measurements were with the fans running at around 40%, which is around 1700 RPM on the OC BIOS and 30% on the silent BIOS. Usually these silent BIOS tests are, a near to silent acoustic reading, but in this card's case it wasn't. It kind of renders the silent BIOS useless if it's gonna make such a noise. Might as well just use the OC BIOS. When it comes to the power usage on the card, the Gigabyte AMD RX 7800 XT Gaming OC peaked at just under 300 watts during tests. I never saw the GPU reach higher than 299 watts in fact when testing out games. This resulted in an average clock speed of 2500 MHz on the OC BIOS and 2485 MHz on the silent BIOS. Of course, you can also overclock this card further, which will enable it to perform slightly better. Given the great cooling on the OC BIOS, I would suggest a 15% increase in the GPU and memory frequency. That should be enough to boost the performance without worrying about thermals. You will see an increase in power draw as well. My test showed a 40 watt increase over the standard clock speed. All of this resulted in a 10 to 12% increase in performance across games. Overall, this card does offer some great value for those looking at a new AMD GPU. The Gigabyte card especially comes with a much needed overclock frequency that helps across games. It also has a lot of breathing room for further tweaks. It is one of the louder GPUs I have reviewed, which may put you off. So much so that the harder this card works, the harder it will be to ignore the fans. You'll often hear the fans over your PC case fans, which could be a problem. At the moment, you can pick this card up for under 14,000 Rand, which is a great asking price for the performance you're getting. However, you need to keep in mind that the closest competition, the RX 7900 GRE, is only a few thousand Rand more. So with the current lineup, it does make it a bit difficult to decide what to invest in. I say that if budget is super tight, I would stick to this card as it does produce some great 1440p results. So those are my thoughts on the Gigabyte AMD RX 7800 XT Gaming OC. Are you looking to pick this card up? Let me know in the comments down below. As usual, thanks for watching and please do consider liking and subscribing for future content. Also be sure to visit glitch.online for more gaming tech news and reviews. And until next time, farewell.